Hello friends, good to have you tuning in today. Once again, I just want to refer to this wonderful book, Deeper Experiences of Famous Christians. A couple of days ago we read an excerpt from this book about the ministry of John Wesley. I want to follow on from that today and read something of the life and ministry of the great evangelist George Whitefield. I don't think that since New Testament times has there been a greater evangelist than the saintly George Whitefield. In Britain and also in America and in other places, Whitefield literally was used of God to reach tens of thousands of souls for Jesus Christ. Only eternity will reveal the greatness of the ministry of the Reverend George Whitefield. Just going to read an excerpt from this book, Deeper Experiences of Famous Christians. George Whitefield was the prince of open-air preachers. Perhaps no preacher was ever gifted with a more powerful voice for open-air work or preached to a larger outdoor congregation than did Whitefield. It is estimated that he preached to 100,000 people at Cambuslang, Scotland. And that 10,000 people professed conversion to Christ as a result of that sermon. God seemed to endow him with supernatural strength for open-air work at a time when church doors were closed against him. Benjamin Franklin claimed to have tested the voice of Whitefield and heard him distinctly over a mile away. But Whitefield was born. His father was a wine merchant and innkeeper. Whitefield was a wild, unrestrained lad. And in 1732, he went to Oxford University at the age of 18. To his great delight, he was taken into the band of Methodists, which then numbered 15. A book entitled The Life of God and the Soul of Man, loaned to him by Charles Wesley, made Whitefield realise that outward works and ceremonies could not save his soul. When he read that true religion is a union of the soul with God, or Christ formed within us, a ray of spiritual light darted into his soul. From that moment he knew that he must be a new creature. At the moment of his ordination, Whitefield made a complete consecration of himself to God and received the anointing of the Spirit that made him so mighty a worker in God's harvest field. That day was June 20th, 1736. He was 21 years old. Although his youth provoked sneers at first, great crowds soon flocked to hear him. His preaching of the new birth attracted all sorts of people. Every nook and corner of the church was crowded and half the people had to be turned away. So this man has been converted. On the very day of his ordination, he yields himself fully and completely and gladly to Jesus Christ in absolute surrender and receives the anointing of the Spirit of God to preach. The book goes on. Whitefield began his open-air preaching at Kingswood, Bristol in 1739. There coal miners gathered to hear him. His audiences doubled and tripled until he found himself preaching to 20,000 people. Tears streamed down the cheeks of the coal-begrimed men, and hundreds were brought to Christ. Whitefield had now stopped using printed prayers and written sermons to pray and preach extempore as he felt led by the Spirit of God. On his second and subsequent trips to America, Whitefield met with very great success. He preached to large audiences and won many souls to Christ. Contemporary reports claim that every student in Harvard University was converted to Christ during his meetings there. Benjamin Franklin was deeply impressed with his preaching, and celebrated Jonathan Edwards wept while listening to his sermons. Whitefield's body was frail, so the power of his voice seemed almost supernatural. The vividness of his preaching also seemed supernatural. Then to conclude, like John Wesley, Whitefield was a strenuous worker. In his prime, he seldom preached less than 15 times a week. It is estimated that he preached at least 18,000 sermons over a period of 34 years. He often preached 4 or 5 times in one day. Whitefield died in 1770 during his seventh visit to America. He preached up to the day preceding his death. Whitefield, the great evangelist, saved by the grace of God, anointed with the Spirit of God. The deeper experiences of famous Christians. Always so much more. May the Lord take us up in these days and use us for his glory. God bless you, friends. Thank you for joining us.